Well, welcome to Christian Answers. This is Pastor Jeff Short, your Bible teacher and cultural commentator. And today we are tackling a very practical topic. A lot of times I'll talk about theology, I'll talk about the Bible, I will talk about some kind of a controversy or issue that's involving thinking about God, thinking about the Bible, and applying that to Christian living and everything like that. Today, we are doing that, but we're doing it in a very practical way, and we're dealing with the issue of affordability. That is a word that's becoming widespread in our culture today because of inflation. Costs are going up. The price of gasoline per gallon is going up because of the Iran war effort and so on and so forth. But that's not the only reason. We are actually at this time, when you want to really boil it down, we are paying for the COVID years. And what I mean by that is if you look at government expenditures during 2020 and then a couple years following it under the Biden administration, there was massive government spending, massive government borrowing, budget deficits galore, giving people, for example, extended unemployment insurance, giving businesses millions of dollars in payment protection plan, PPP plan from the government. So in other words, they wanted government wanted all the businesses to shut down for a number of months during COVID. They said, "We will pay you to keep your employees paid. And all you have to do is agree to shut your business down for a few months, and we will pay you millions of dollars to give their paychecks and keep them afloat," and so on and so forth. So the government spent billions and trillions of dollars over the COVID years. And so now we're paying for that in the result of higher inflated prices for everything. It's just a mathematical certainty. When you spend more than you bring in, when you borrow heavily, you are going to interject money into the economy, and then that raises the prices of everything because you have more money chasing fewer goods. So that's where we're at right now. That's the main reason, the COVID years. But there are also other reasons, and I won't get into all of that because that's a whole different topic. But what do we do with affordability? There are all kinds of people crying out, "I can't afford a home anymore. I can't afford a car anymore. I can't afford to buy groceries anymore. I'm losing my job. My income is not keeping up with the cost of living," and so on. I've never seen as many people on the internet crying and complaining about affordability and how it's out of control. And so I thought, okay, what would I do if I were in the place of, say, a younger person just starting out in my early 20s and wanting to, say, raise a family, buy a home, get reliable transportation, afford living in the United States? What would I do as a Christian? And so I want to outline about 10 or so points that are important, I believe, in tackling this problem, the problem of affordability. Because after all, we have to react to things that appear in our lives, and we can't just passively sit on the sidelines or cry out to people and say, "Hey, you need to help me, do something for me. Government needs to do this and government needs to do that," or "I'm entitled to a house and I'm entitled to a car." No, we're not entitled to anything. We're not entitled to food. We're not entitled to a decent job. We're not entitled to a place to live. These are all things that we have to go out and actively, as adults, acquire and work hard and think hard and pray hard and trust God, and then we will be able to get housing, food, clothing, transportation, These are things that we have to go out and get. They're not things that we should expect someone, even the government, to give us. That's called an entitlement mentality, and that is not reality. Because when you say the government needs to give you food and give you housing and gives you transportation and all of these basic needs, you're basically saying somebody else needs to pay for my basic needs. And that is false. No, there's no law anywhere that says that people have to give you all the things you need in life. You survive by going out and getting these things. And if there's a roadblock in one avenue of you getting these things, then you have to adapt. You have to modify your plans. You have to change your pace. You have to do things actively. You're an active agent. So how, as Christians, should we approach the problem of affordability and not just wring our hands and, oh, the government needs to do this and wait for the government to do this or that or the other? No, we don't look to gov. We look to God. We look to G-O-D, not to G-O-V. So we need to remember a number of different things. So the first one is pray over everything. This is what the Bible says over and over again. Pray without ceasing, the Bible teaches. The Bible teaches in Philippians, in the New Testament, that we are to not be anxious about anything, but to pray over everything with thanksgiving. So you have to not forget about the things you do have. Pray about the things that you need. So if you're needing housing, affordable housing, if you're needing affordable food, if you're needing a job, if you're needing transportation, you need an automobile or some means of getting to your work or getting around to get your supplies, these are all things that you pray about. Now, unfortunately, we live in a secular world, so this is not assumed. A lot of people, they just cry and bellyache about all the price increases and the inflation, and it is. I see it every day. I go to the store and I want to buy milk, and just a couple days ago, it was $2.79 a gallon, and now I walked in the store and it's now $3.05 a gallon. So it's gone up something like 25 to 30 cents a gallon just in the course of a week or so. And of course, the gasoline prices, just a few months ago, I was paying around $3.25 a gallon, and now I paid $4.99 a gallon. So it's gone tremendously up, and it makes a big difference because if you travel across a stretch of land and what normally would cost you $25 to fill your tank now is going to cost you $50 or more to fill your tank. So it's a reality, but we don't cry about things to the government. We don't turn to other people and blame them and all this. We deal with it. And one of the first things you do is you pray about everything. You have a prayer journal if you want to write it out. I like to write out the prayers, or at least the prayer item, so that I get it out there in the real world on print. Just get it out of my head and not keep it in my head, but I put it on paper and I say, okay, I need transportation, I need food, affordability, housing, whatever. And you pray about these things every day and over again until they are available. Now, number two, you give 10% of your income to the church. You tithe, it's called. Now, this is important because this directly involves your finances with God, or God with your finances. This links you with the economy of God. So you have your own personal economy, you have your own income, you have your own resources, but by tithing, by giving 10% of that income or whatever resources that you get, you are linking your personal resources with God's vast resources. And it's a test of faith. It's actually a test of faith. If you don't give to your church, if you don't give to Christian kingdom building, then you're basically saying, I say that I believe all this stuff, but when it comes right down to it, I really need all that money and I can't give. I wish I could, but I can't. You're you're not really believing the promises of God. It says in the New Testament, my God shall supply all your need according to his riches in heaven. My God will supply all your need. Do you believe that? Okay. Well, then it says to be a generous giver. It actually says in the New Testament to be a cheerful giver. Well, if you're not giving, you're not believing that passage. You're doubting that passage. You're in unbelief. So pray about everything. Pray about the finances. Pray about affordability. Ask God for help. And also keep up your giving to giving outside of yourself. If you don't give outside of yourself, you're being selfish. You're saying, I'm going to hoard all my resources for me and my family. I'm going to hoard it all for us. I'm not going to believe any of the promises of the Bible that talk about God providing my needs. I'm not going to believe any of the instructions as to be generous and give to the work of the Lord. Jesus pointed out the poor widow in the temple who gave all proportionally more than all of the rich people putting in to the offering. And he commended her. He didn't rush over and say, oh, no, don't give your little coin because you really need all that to live on. No, he let her give that coin because he realized that when you give, you're linking your finances with the vast resources of God. So never, ever stop giving. Even if you have half of what you had before, you give a tithe on half of what you had before, just 10% of it. And God will stretch that 90% into something that you can live on and survive on, or even thrive on. Number 3, form a basic plan or budget, as you want to call it, or as Dave Ramsey would call it, a budget. Get yourself a plan. Pray about a plan. Ask God, okay, how much do we need, bare minimum, to live on each month? If you're going through an affordability crisis, you need all your resources working together. So you can't be wasting resources. You can't be buying things whenever you just want to buy things. You can't be operating without a plan, a unified plan. That's why what a plan does, it unifies your finances. And that's what you need when there's an affordability crisis, which we're going through. So you need to come up with a plan. Get a plan. Ask God for a plan. That's part of the prayer. You ask, okay, what is the budget? What can we live on? What is realistic? What do we have to have? And what can we live on? So you get a plan, get a budget. That's step 4. And then step 5, you need to learn ways to save and actively look ways to save. Look for ways to save money. During an affordability crisis, you can't go on the way you were before the affordability crisis. So, in other words, if inflation is running rampant in the economy, if the gas prices are running wild, you have to figure out how to deal with that new reality. You know, a lot of people today, they think that they're the only people that have ever dealt with a problem economically. And that's so wrong. That's so ignorant. If you look back, even in the country, the United States here, think about the Great Depression. You don't think those people during the Great Depression had it worse than you do today? They had it a lot worse than you do today. And they survived. And they went through that Great Depression, years of Great Depression. And they scratched and they saved and they found new ways to do things, and they found ways to feed themselves, and they found ways to find work, and they found ways to house themselves and to transportation from some job. Or if they didn't have a job, they found new ways to get food. They grew a garden and they hunkered down until the financial storm was over. They dealt with it. Today, we are so spoiled and we are so privileged and we are so prosperous in this country that we really think, a lot of people think, especially younger people, they really think that people never had to go through financial struggles before. And they're the only ones that have ever had to deal with the crisis of the finances and so forth. No, that's so wrong. The opposite is true. They are living in a prosperous bubble. And at the worst that we have to go through, affordability crisis, so-called, that is the envy of most of the world. If you go to Africa, if you go to Latin America, parts of Latin America, you go to Asia, for example, in India, that vast country, billion people or so, they would look at our situation as the promised land, even with our so-called affordability problem in crisis. So we have to get a right perspective. Economic problems will come and they'll go. There'll be cycles. You'll be riding high one time and then you'll be going low. Economics ups and downs come all the time. If you look back, just look back 15 years ago or coming up on 20 years ago, the great economic crisis, 2008, the housing bubble, and that was a crisis for a lot of people. A lot of people got laid off. A lot of people threatened to lose their homes and did lose their homes and so on and so forth. People had to adapt. They had to adjust. And so, and even before that, you looked in the 70s and there were long lines to get gas during the oil embargo, and they had to deal with that economic problem. And then there was World War II, if you go back further, and people had to tighten their belt and get a new economic plan for their family, a budget to deal with the shortages during the war years. You go way further back, you go back to the Civil War time, and people in both the North and the South had to suffer through economic hardship, especially the South. And they dealt with that. Then you go back to the Revolutionary War time. You're dealing with great depravity and suffering. And so we have it really good. So we need to get out of that privileged entitlement mentality and begin to work the problem. You know, and again, that first point, pray over everything with thanksgiving. We need to appreciate, count our blessings, thank the Lord for what we do have. Just like, you know, Apollo 13 astronauts, after their spacecraft started going haywire out halfway to the moon, they asked the question, okay, what do we have that's still working on the spacecraft? Okay, so they took stock and found out what they actually had that worked, that was still alive, and then they built on that foundation. That's what we have to do today as Christians. What do we have as far as resources? And then where do we need to go? So you pray over everything. You keep giving to the work of the Lord, even during financial crisis. You form a budget, a plan. And the next thing is stay out of debt. You need to stay out of debt. Now, the temptation is, because you don't want to give up the standard you've been living by before the economic crisis, is the temptation is to, okay, well, I'll just put it on credit card and I'll just keep racking up the debt because I don't want to cut my lifestyle. You know, I've achieved a certain lifestyle, certain level, standard of living. Say you've broke out of poverty and now you're middle class or even upper middle class. It's like, no, I want to still eat the same way every dinner. I want to go out for Starbucks every day at lunch. I want to drive a nice fancy car. I want to live in a huge home. And I don't want to drop any of those areas of my life. Okay, so the solution a lot of people take is they start borrowing heavily. Maybe they start borrowing away against their home. They start borrowing on credit cards, racking up the credit card debt, which is over $1 trillion right now, I was told by the statistics now. Consumer credit card debt is over $1 trillion. So people are just racking up debt like crazy. That is a bad choice. No. During an economic crisis or affordability crisis, you need to cut budget and find ways to save, not plunge yourself deeper into debt. Now, I'm not saying don't ever use your credit card, but if at all possible, pay it off at the end of the month. Use the credit card for convenience, not as a way to pay your bills. And avoid debt as much as possible. And again, you can hear Dave Ramsey beating this drum, but he's right. Debt gets people into debt deeper and deeper, and it really puts pressure and anxiety on the situation where it doesn't have to be. Just bite the bullet and cut back and strategize and come up with new plans. Don't just say, well, I'm just going to power through this. I'm going to live the same lifestyle and do the same things I did before this crisis and the inflation, and I'm just going to put it all on credit card and then just hope for the best. No. Do something more constructive than go into debt. That doesn't take any prayer. That doesn't take any planning or budgeting. It just is a cheap and dirty way out. Also, learn to live with used things that need repair. Learn how to fix things yourself. Be a little bit more self-sufficient. A lot of times people, when they have a leaky pipe underneath the sink, they'll just call a plumber. Well, yeah, if you're wealthy enough to be able to afford paying for services to come into your house all the time, yeah, you can do that. But if you're going through an affordability crisis and there's an economic downturn and you need to save every penny, you need to learn how to fix things yourself. Go on YouTube, look at the videos, learn how to fix your car. If there's a problem with your car, the first instinct is not to call the repair shop and say, hey, can I come in and have you repair my car? That's going to cost you hundreds and thousands of dollars to do it that way. Why not just take some time and look at YouTube videos and try to figure this problem out yourself and see if it's something you can fix yourself? Now, some things you can't fix yourself. Some people don't have the mechanical ability to do that, but you need to begin to think in terms of like the old farmers used to do. They were able to fix most everything. The women of the house were able to mend the clothes. They were pretty self-sufficient. They did not call in a lot of these external services that cost a lot of money. So if you're tightening your belt, you need to do it also learning new skills, which is learn how to fix things. Another tip would be don't eat out. Prepare your meals in your home. Maybe you've gotten into a habit of every lunch hour you go out and you get a fast food or something like that because that's very convenient for whatever you do at work. Or you buy your lunch at some restaurant near where you work or in the cafeteria or whatever, and it costs $5 to $10, $15, $20 or more dollars every day. How about packing a lunch? That's the way a lot of millions of people eat their lunch, and it saves money, and food is cheaper generally from the grocery stores than the restaurant, and take that step during an affordability crisis. Also, constantly look for ways to save money. Use coupons. Buy on sale. Buy bargain food when it's on sale. If you find a bag of rice, 20-pound bag of rice that's on sale at some grocery store that's half off or whatever, buy it. Buy it for a rainy day. Use sales, coupons, and get used to buying things used, quality used. Go on Facebook Marketplace or Craigslist or go to swap meets or whatever. Utilize things that are not brand spanking new out of the box. Now, if you can find a new thing, if you can find a sale at Walmart or a sale on Amazon.com or an eBay sale, and it's new, great. If you need something, you can buy it. But take the effort. It takes effort. It takes time and effort and energy and creativity to save money. And a lot of people have grown used to not even bothering. I don't want to spend my time wasting my time looking for sales. Okay, well then you're going to pay more. And if it's affordability crisis you're going through, you need to learn how to shop for those savings. You need to learn how to do the work, as they say. Okay, the next thing is avoid all fees, fines, and penalties. Avoid speeding tickets. Drive within the limit. You can't afford it. Avoid fees, bank fees. Don't overdraft checks. Don't pay a credit card late and get a late fee. You take all these fees and penalties and tickets and adjustments, and if you're sloppy and careless, you can pay a lot of money in fees and penalties. During an affordability crisis, it's just good stewardship also. The Bible talks about being responsible for the resources we have. And part of that is to avoid having to pay out of pocket for just stupid mistakes, banking mistakes, driving too fast, parking in the wrong spot, getting tickets. All of these rob you of resources you need. Also, lottery tickets. Forget about the lottery tickets. That is another temptation. That's a waste of money, and you need to save your money, especially during affordability. These are basic steps that anybody can take, and you can weather the affordability crisis. You can learn how to cut back. You can learn how to save. You can learn how to do your own maintenance on your home, your car. You can learn how to repair things around the house. If the wheel falls off of your lawnmower and now you can't mow your yard, hey, figure out how to put it back on yourself and don't take it into the shop because they're going to charge it $50 to $100 and $150, whatever their rate is. Need to learn how to save like the old timers used to. And some of the ways that the people got through the Great Depression, we need to relearn those. Don't waste food. Eat better food. Don't buy a lot of snacks and sugary drinks and sugar cookies and snacks. Learn how to change your patterns of habits. And by the grace of God, if you're praying over these things and you're asking God for his wisdom, James in the New Testament talks about if you ask for wisdom, believe that God will give you that wisdom. And you've got to ask him in prayer, give me wisdom, God, give me creativity, help me get through the affordability crisis. And you will get through the affordability crisis if you keep on praying and if you follow some of these basic principles of dealing with financial challenges. You can get through. God will give you that wisdom. He will show you the way. Just as in every other area of life, we always should be praying about every other problem we have in life also, not just money problems. And God will see us through, and he will help us get through the dark times and into the light. And so don't give up hope. Put these truths to practice in your life, and we'll see you back next week on another program. God bless.